My name is Mark, and I serve the master at the Gilberta Company. If my memory does not fail me, I recently turned 37. Benno was born the very year I arrived as a Lahange apprentice, so 30 years of my life have been spent here. Truly, time flies. I had joined as a Lahange with plans to return to my family's store, but my father died. My older brother refused to help the Gilberta Company, and, worse, mocked the death of Master Benno's father while cutting ties entirely. I still clearly remember the wrath I felt that day, and the moment I swore to protect Master Benno and the Gilberta Company to spite my family. We worked through nonstop, sleepless nights to restore the store to its former glory. Enough years have passed that it is safe to say I also pulled strings to collapse my own family's store in the process. Master Benno had lost interest in marriage after his fiancée Liz died. Before I knew it, I too had passed the age for it. Corinna's child would eventually take over, so the company was no longer in great danger of collapse. Which brings us to the present day, where Master Benno marched through the door carrying Myne, limp and glazed with exhaustion, while Lutz chased breathlessly behind him. Thinking back on my past year, gathering materials for the Rinsham workshop, securing craftsmen, running around the city for plant paper tools, calming the conflict with the Parchment Guild, setting up yet another workshop, I had a very bad feeling. Mark, we're training a sweets maker. Get ready. Ah, Myne had done it again. While Master Benno checked various wood boards with gleaming eyes, I turned to Lutz for a calm account. Lutz was exactly the sort of apprentice one rarely encountered. Quick to shift gears, a fast and compliant learner with a serious and determined nature. He could explain what had happened in concise order. According to him, a taste testing event had followed the meeting at the Merchants Guild, and there Master Benno had a confrontation with the Guildmaster's chef. The master ended up angrily declaring he would just train a chef himself. With his hatred of losing, asking him to give up was impossible. Meanwhile, Myne and Master Benno had escalated to a full-throated argument, Myne standing on her chair to be at eye level with him. Once again, you need sugar to make my sweets. How many times have I said this by now? You don't need sugar to bake bread. They've got to practice using an oven first, yeah? But there are already bakeries throughout town, and even a baker's guild. You're going to clash with vested interests again. Just for practice, I'm betting you're going to try and steal a baker from the baker's guild, aren't you? You'll never start a new business if you're scared of the vested interests. The argument reminded me of Master Benno's old fights with Liz. At times it felt like the master looked the most alive when furiously arguing with Myne about business, as if sparring with someone as clever and relentless as she was felt as satisfying as it had with Liz, though with Liz he had never once won. I clapped my hands and intervened. Regarding sugar, Master Benno had Uncle Emil's connections in the sovereignty and one of Otto's childhood friends who was still a traveling merchant. He would have the baker practice with bread first. The biggest remaining problem was the inevitable conflict with vested interests. The Guildmaster would come complaining again, just as he had over the Parchment Guild. Myne, do you have any suggestions to reduce friction with the Bakers Guild, as you did with the Parchment Guild? What? You want me to think of an idea? I gave her a gentle prompt. Perhaps our bread would be a different kind of bread, used for something other than ordinary baking, and watched her dark blue hair sway as she turned with golden eyes sparkling and raised her left hand high. I've got it. I want to eat Italian food. None of us recognized the word, but she pressed on regardless. You want to practice using the oven for food that doesn't take sugar, right? Pizza and lasagna all fit that bill. Oh, right, we can probably make quiches and pies too, not to mention just cooking meat in the oven. Wow, now I'm excited. Beside me, Lutz groaned and held his head in his hands. It's too late. Myne started going crazy. She has a goal in mind, and now she's going to rush right towards it. Master Benno's done for. Before the master could respond, Myne pressed forward. Mr. Benno, you should give up on sweets and just make a restaurant, like a fancy restaurant for selling fancy food. Hey, hold up. You're not the one deciding things here. It'll be fine. You can use your sugar to make sweets for dessert. Let's just calm down and make an Italian restaurant. Just as Lutz had feared, The master was losing control of the situation. I felt that Lutz being dragged around by Myne resembled me being dragged around by Master Benno, and I wiped a single tear off my heart. Lutz, please grow strong. Don't just let her drag you around. Pretend that she is going on a rampage and prepare accordingly. Doing so will lessen the burden on your heart. There is a knack to being properly dragged around. I made him a silent vow. I would raise Lutz to survive whatever these two put him through. While we shared our mutual suffering, Myne listed reason after reason why a restaurant was superior. More demographics, better oven practice, motivated chef, experimental recipes tested on customers before nobles. When Lutz said her passionate ranting always somehow convinced him she was right, I nodded. An important skill for merchants is making their customers want to buy. Observe her carefully. He shrugged with a laugh. Too bad Myne only uses her talent to get stuff she wants. Then, mid-sentence, Myne face-planted onto the table, still trying to talk, words muffled against the wood. She informed us that there was a world of difference between rich people's food and noble food, then giggled victoriously. I haven't told Lice anything about cooking this kind of stuff. Ehehe. I thanked her graciously for her wonderful suggestion, said she seemed quite exhausted and ought to go home, and directed Lutz to take her. After seeing the children off, I returned to the office to find Master Benno face-planted against his desk, mirroring mine perfectly. He looked up without lifting his head. Sheesh, Myne never stopped surprising me. A restaurant was simpler than the sweets plan and would not cause friction with the Bakers' Guild. Noble food was varied and altogether different from what any bakery sold. Customers would come even at higher prices. When Master Benno wondered aloud how Myne knew so much about noble cuisine, I answered simply, because she is mine. He didn't look satisfied, but that was the only answer. He clapped his hands to change the subject. Yeah, that reminds me. I'm thinking about adopting Lutz. What do you think? The fact you have recently begun saying what comes to mind without thinking makes me believe Myne is influencing you in a negative way. Ha, as if! Don't lump me in with that thoughtless buffoon. He was furious, but adopting Lutz in his position meant third parties would view that child as his successor. He would be starting a war of inheritance with Corinna's child before that child was even born. I pointed out that a leheral contract might suffice, or a marriage between Lutz and Corinna's child if she turned out to be a girl. Master Benno shook his head. That won't work with Lutz. He's only got eyes for mine. Plus, his real dream is to be a traveling merchant. It won't be long before Myne gets taken by a noble, from this city, from another city, maybe even sent from the sovereignty. Once she's gone, Lutz won't have any reason to stay with us. When Myne leaves this city, I want Lutz to be there ready to go with her. Corinna was the real successor of the Gilberta Company. He was only standing in for her. He wanted to leave the store to Corinna and Otto and start his own store. Myne and Lutz had reminded him of things he had forgotten after his father's death. Even the dream I forgot after I had to dedicate everything to protect the store and my family after Dad died. You wanted to be the kind of merchant that held influence over the entire world, was it? Master Benno opened his eyes wide and went spectacularly red. Why do you remember that? I remember everything about you. He groaned and held his head, then recovered and coughed once. If I keep making the products in Myne's head a reality, don't you think my dream will come true? I'm thinking of starting by going to the city my siblings live in and making a plant paper workshop there. Mark, what are you going to do? He leaned back in his chair, fingers intertwined, waiting with the same expression as when he had asked me if I would leave the store after his father's death. I believe Theo will work better with Otto than I would. I will stay with you, Master Benno. You need someone to train Lutz, yes? He sighed with visible relief. She was certainly his goddess of water. Thanks to that, I too had remembered my own dream. If Myne was Benno's goddess of water, then I would be his god of fire. A bell rang loudly in the middle of the dark city, announcing that working citizens should wake up. Morning already. In the past, I slept right through first bell, but now that I was an apprentice merchant, I had no choice. As a Lahange contracted until the age of 10, I worked every other day. I grabbed breakfast while Mom complained at me, Hard bread dunked in yesterday's soup, milk from eggs we had traded with the chickens, wiped my mouth on my sleeve. Oh, crap. I stared at the milk stain. Mark had told me to eat gracefully and use a cloth. Nobody in my builder family had ever taught me to clean my mouth after eating, keep my clothes and hair clean, speak politely, maintain proper posture, or treat things carefully. It was only through Myne telling me to follow Mark's example that I was even starting to notice these things. I lived by the south gate, farthest from the company. Running through dim alleyways, I arrived just before the employee door opened, raced upstairs to my attic room, washed my face, rubbed salt against my teeth, and changed into apprentice clothes. Yeah, I should wash my hair today. Greasy. Mark would warn me if I didn't. My brothers mocked me for using rincham at home, so I always washed here. Good morning. Good morning, Lutz. Mr. Mark's already in the back. Lutz, take the hairpins to the front. The hairpins Myne and I had made over the winter were selling well. Even in summer, traveling merchants drawn to rare products kept buying them. I placed them delicately on a tray. Of the 5 differently colored flowers, one looked noticeably worse than the rest. I laughed, thinking it was probably Myne's. Second bell brought customers pouring in. As a mostly useless apprentice, I was still restricted to the back, carrying goods as directed. The spring Lahange, the son of a large store, worked the floor with ease. I still couldn't determine cloth quality by touch alone, and Leon, the Liherl, who had been promoted from Lihange thanks to his cloth expertise, handled deliveries with a confidence I envied. Fourth bell signaled lunch. I changed out of my uniform and bought a galette at the Western market stands. Flour, ham, sausage, easy to eat without soup. I finished it at the plaza and by habit wiped my hands on my pants. I froze, looked around. Who? Nobody. Back at my attic room, I drew water at the well, added rincham, and washed my hair by pouring the bucket over my head into the wash tub and repeating until clean. I toweled off, washed my uniforms in towel, and hung them to dry. When I returned to the store, Mark looked up. Oh, I see you washed your hair. It's good that you've learned to do that before I pointed out. Keeping oneself clean is very important. Having my efforts recognized gave me the strength to keep trying. After fifth bell, the Liherls taught the Lahanges. Today we'll be learning about how to write supply orders. Each store writes their orders somewhat differently, so forget what you learned at home. Thanks to Myne teaching me to read, write, and do math, and to our prior business with Benno, I already knew how the Gilberta Company wrote their orders. The Liherl checked mine, nodded, and told me to work on the sales report math instead. Clicking through the calculator pieces, I was still slow, but only a little practice away from the other's speed. Myne really is amazing. Lutz, the master is calling for you. Please go to his office. Envious glares followed me out. Lutz again, seriously. Master Benno always calls him the Myne chief. They weren't wrong. Nobody else could be her chief but me. There you are, Lutz. It's about Myne, said Master Benno the moment I stepped in. What's everyone around you saying about Myne joining the temple? I don't think anybody knows she's becoming a shrine maiden except me and her family. Everyone else thinks she's just working from home. Her family's not spreading the word since it would look bad from the outside. Only orphans joined the temple. Pre-baptism children abandoned with no relatives to take them in. Baptized kids became live-in apprentices under employers instead, keeping their jobs and status. The rumors about the temple orphanage were grim. Children worked to the bone in noble mansions, trapped for life, never participating in baptism or adulthood ceremonies, not even counted as citizens. Myne's family would be mocked and belittled if it became known. Myne's going to be treated like a blue shrine maiden, but most people won't understand the significance of that, and we don't know what'll happen if she gets involved with a real pain of a noble. Don't say anything you don't have to. I've gotten reports that someone's sniffing around the city for details on Myne. Freda thought he was just a merchant Myne had stepped on the toes of, but we know she's entering the temple. It wouldn't be strange for someone on the nobility's side to be gathering information. Lutz, it won't be hard for them to find out that you have a magic contract signed with her. Keep an eye on yourself and your surroundings. Myne had been sick with a fever for 3 days. She should be improving. He told me to bring her to the store when she was well enough. The sixth bell rang as I left his office. I changed out of my uniform in the attic room, checked the water jug for the next morning, and joined the crowd streaming home through the darkening streets. Back when I was gathering in the forest, the sixth bell meant the gates were closing, and I could slip through alleyways home. Now I was just part of the crowd. At home, Mom was making dinner, and my brothers were already back. Gah, Ralph, that's mine. Your fault for being slow. Ralph stole my ham slice. Zasha went for my sausage a second later. Stop, roared my mother. Her glare saved my sausage, but their eyes kept tracking my plate. I scarfed everything down before they could strike again. Seventh bell. I went straight to bed. Couldn't wake at first bell without sleeping early, and there was nothing to do after dark anyway. Better to save the candles. I think I'll go check on Myne tomorrow. She should be better by now. Is that all we have to discuss today? In that case, a reminder that we are holding a taste testing event in the larger meeting room for a confectionery I plan to sell soon. Drop by if you have the time. My granddaughter said there would be enough for everyone here and their servants. Benno, Frida put her all into this, knowing that you would be coming. You wouldn't betray her expectations, would you? Benno stood up with a visible grimace. I understood that expression. He would go even though he didn't want to. I left the room with a snort. Upstairs in my Guildmaster chair, I reflected. The taste testing event was Myne's suggestion, enthusiastically taken up by my granddaughter Freda as a challenge to mark the soon-to-be-sold pound cakes as the Uthmar companies while finding the most profitable flavors. Freda had asked me not to attend. My strong influence would make all her hard work vanish like mist. She was right, so I waited. Lady Freda has certainly been full of spirit lately. I suppose it is all thanks to Myne, said Cosimo, my longtime right-hand man, as he poured my tea. Freda, due to the devouring ravaging her health, had barely gone outside before signing a contract with a noble. She had met a fellow devouring child named Myne shortly before her baptism, been moved by Myne's straightforward and unwavering pursuit of her dreams, and come fully alive, managing this entire event with a sharp mind and organizational talent far beyond her years, which is precisely why it hurts that I failed to acquire Myne for myself. Hairpins, rincham, pound cakes, rum top, plant paper. I can see already how Myne's inventions and ideas will bring enormous change to Ehrenfest. Myne's influence is still limited to the commoner sphere, said Cosimo, but she is a small seed that will grow into a large, revolutionary tree. We will need to maneuver such that she is not crushed by nobles who hate change, and negotiate as best we can, such that she is taken in by a progressive noble who will raise her well. That was the duty of the Merchants' Guild, and the Uthmar Company with its long history. Through every change of archduke, food had been the one thing no outside noble could fully control. Local seasons, local harvests, local knowledge. The Uthmar Company had filled that niche generation after generation and been selected as third-party negotiator between noble retinues and established workers, which eventually led to the founding of the Merchants' Guild itself. My grandson Damien arrived to report. The pound cakes were received very well, with everyone comparing flavors and serious expressions. But the moment Benno entered the room, he caught Myne and forced her to change into his store's apprentice uniform. I had hoped to build up an association between Myne and the Uthmar Company, but I suppose that failed then. Myne's inventions were too much for one store to monopolize. The entire city deserved them. I had offered to handle the plant paper for him, even proposing to rename the Parchment Guild to the more general Paper Guild, but Benno kept it to himself. A single store monopolizing enormous wealth would be the start of chaos. The conflict between you two arises not only from your different economic philosophies, I'm afraid. You are in part responsible for this, Master Gustav, said Cosimo. I had only good intentions with that, which means nothing if they don't understand your intentions. When Benno's father died, the Gilberta Company threatened to crumble. I offered to wed Benno's mother to protect the store, a bedridden widow with an inexperienced young son. How could they refuse? They treated it as an insult. My son explained the error at length. Later, I offered Benno one of my daughters after his fiancée died. He was a man, Why would he be insulted? My son explained again. I eventually went through proper channels and offered engagements between Benno's sisters and my sons. One fled the city, the other married a traveling merchant. For some reason, Benno grew quite hostile toward me. Very troubling. We went through some rough times, but luckily, I've managed to warm my relationship with Benno somewhat by selling him information on the devouring and selling Myne a magic tool. That is quite an optimistic view of things, Master Gustav. I imagine Benno is becoming even more defensive around you, especially when Myne is involved. After all, you lied about the price to try and trick Myne into your store. I was still formulating my response when a white bird slid into the room through the closed windows and doors. I opened my eyes wide. This generally happened only once every few years. The white bird immediately turned into a letter before me, the method nobles used for high-priority messages. It was a request from the temple. As Myne would be joining as a shrine maiden, they wanted all the information we had on her workshop, her current funds, and so on. Nothing was to be omitted. Myne is joining the temple? She had been registered as forewoman of the Myne workshop just days ago, so she could operate from home under Benno's protection. No report of this had reached me. I had gambled she had at most half a year without magic tools or a contract. All water under the bridge now. The temple had divine tools. Myne's life would be saved, but it was not a kind place. Gray robes were treated as slaves by the blue robes, forced into absolute submission. I had spent considerable effort finding Lord Henrik, a lay noble of good character, for Frida's contract precisely to avoid that fate. Myne would not be so fortunate. Did Benno know? Registering her as forewoman, the new magic contract, had he done all of it for her sake? Benno, you don't know what you're dealing with. If the Gilberta Company blundered here, the Merchants' Guild would be dragged down with them. I would give up on acquiring Myne for the Uthmar Company. As for Frida, I should minimize their contact until Myne's noble situation was clear. I felt genuine pity, but Frida's safety came first. I began writing my response to the temple's inquiry, making Myne appear as valuable as possible so that they might treat her even a little better. With her vast knowledge of unknown products, the temple could obtain sizable wealth through her, and given the political events in the sovereignty and how the temple was lacking in both money and mana, perhaps every little bit counted. I will need to summon Benno and ask for the details. Should I write a meeting request, Master Gustav? Please do. Cosimo had barely begun writing when Frida burst through the door, eyebrows arched in fury. We have a problem, grandfather. Benno said that he will begin training chefs of his own. He intends to keep Myne's knowledge of recipes to himself as well, even though Myne said she would let Lace take care of all her recipes. I looked at her. I had known Frida since before she could speak. I had watched her learn to walk, learn to read, learn to smile at customers in a way that concealed everything she was actually thinking. I had watched the devouring hollow her out and make her careful and quiet, the way it made all devouring children careful and quiet, burning off the excess, the waste, the indulgence of ordinary emotion. She had learned very young that a body that might fail at any moment could not afford to spend energy on fury. She was furious now. Her small hands were pressed flat against her thighs, white at the knuckles. Her jaw was set. Her eyes, my granddaughter's eyes, silver gray and usually so composed, were blazing with the specific anger of someone who has watched something unfair happen to a person they care about and is not willing to pretend otherwise. I found that my own hands had begun to tremble. Not from anger, or not only from anger. Something older than anger moved through me then. Something I had not felt in some years, that I had almost forgotten the weight of. I was an old man, and I had spent my life learning to keep things in their proper compartments, to weigh sentiment against strategy, and let strategy win. I had done this so many times that I had stopped noticing the weight of what I set aside. Watching Frida stand there burning for her friend, I noticed it. I thought of the girl I had failed to acquire, Myne, who had faced the devouring and survived, who had made paper from plants and hairpins from winter thread, and a recipe for pound cake that had left my most experienced chefs stunned and competitive, who had walked into the temple, I now understood, and negotiated herself a blue robe through sheer force of knowledge and personality, who had a childhood friend who signed a magic contract to stay connected to her, and a merchant who burned through his own profit to protect her, who was going into a place I knew better than Benno did, and who was going in without the kind of backing she deserved. My hands trembled. I pressed them flat against the desk to still them. First the hairpins, then Rinsham, then plant paper, entirely removed from his business demographic. And now food as well? He's sticking his hands into every pie he can find. This will not end well. Does Benno wish to collapse his own store? I stood and yelled on instinct, and felt, as I did, the tremor that had started in my hands move briefly through my voice before I controlled it. Cosimo asked me to calm down. Master Gustav, please stay calm. Such excitement is bad for your health, and we are relying on your abilities. You must at least remain healthy and fighting until Lady Freda reaches adulthood. Benno was charging forward with his eyes set on monopolizing profit for his own store, while simultaneously attempting to protect Myne as she went into the temple, nigh defenseless. The pressure of the rampaging Gilberta Company all fell on me. I was the one who had to preserve the balance between the large stores. Benno, you brat, respect your elders more.